Well, thank you very much, and thank you also for the invitation and the opportunity to speak to you here in this remarkable building today. First of all, I want you to, let me see if I get the next one on. Yeah. I want you to imagine a place in the south of France where there is no artificial light in the night. This is increasingly rare, of course, that we have no light pollution. And imagine that we, in this place, which is so natural still, we create a theater in the hill, like the Greeks did and the Romans did. And imagine that we will concentrate, we will focus the light of the full moon on the stage by specially designed mirrors, so to create the theater of the full moon. Indirect light in its best form, of course, coming from the sun and transferred to us by the moon. And now imagine that on stage appears a dancer, illuminated by the moonlight, and a photographer takes her picture, movement captured by moonlight. In fact, this is not an imagination, it's real. It's the theater of the full moon in Gourgoubès in the south of France, near Montpellier. The picture was taken by my French friend, Armenian photographer Rajak Ohanian. The dancer on stage is the Swedish star Carolina Karlsson. The theater was conceived by and created by Humbert Camerlot, and the mirrors are designed by a team from Arab, led by Peter Rice, one of the most esteemed engineers of the last century, who paid tribute to this endeavor in his book, An Engineer Imagines. And the funny thing is, I have seen it for myself. If you concentrate the moonlight 30, 40 times by mirrors, you get to see the most beautiful colors. It's not that cold light anymore. And perhaps we should investigate if the development of the human eye is influenced by moonlight rather than sunlight, because of the limits you have at night as a human being. So this is a story about indirect light. In fact, you can argue that all light is indirect because we only see it when it falls on something. And in analogy with the pictures from the cave of Plato, we're not moving out and seeing the world of outside the cave. We're also not interested in the world of shadows and appearances, as Plato is describing it. The fascinating thing about this, the matter of light and this congruence, hence, is that we are in between. We try to capture the light itself. And of course, light is a very natural thing, and when we shelter ourselves and create buildings, architecture, and the arch of the roof that we put over things and walls, then we make a hole in it so that you get the space illuminated. And I think one of the best examples in balance of opening up and redirecting the light and feeling the way the sun moves is the Pantheon in Rome. So that's a start for all of us. But I will mainly talk about light in relation to art. And of course that starts also by this mere necessity of having light before you could illuminate your studio by electrical, artificial light. This is the studio of a Dutch painter, RIXARCH, who became famous in Paris in the 19th century. And you see there's still a sense of clair-obscur. There's the dark parts, but both from the roof and from the northern light, he gets his illumination in the studio. In modernism, we opened up more, like the studio of Amédée aux Enfants by Le Corbusier. And you see there's already much more light, probably the east and the north, and also the roof, which unfortunately is now closed, but in the pictures of the construction you can still see there is a combination of direct light from the north and indirect light from the roof. And this became more or less the standard for modern museums that were also based in the 19th century, like the Louvre on the right of the picture, and the Dordrecht Museum that I had a chance to restore some 15 years ago. This was all basically 19th century stuff, had a glass roof and some sort of vellum or matted glass to spread the light into the galleries and to lit during the day the paintings. And this functional standard of having northern light became modernized in functionalism, like in the archives of Bauhaus by Walter Gropius, finished after his death in 1979. And a good example of it, very precise, well done example, is the Kruller-Müller Museum in Otterlo in the Netherlands by Wim Quist, more or less of the same period. So that is a standard, having northern light evenly spread and the same almost all of the day, independent of weather conditions. It seemed to be that this was this tooth-thole roof were the standard of museums forever. Until, that is, I happened to see the Menil Museum in Houston, designed by Renzo Piano, in the late 80s. I was a student and a scholar, and I traveled around and could see the building just before it opened, and I was completely struck by the idea of it, the combination of light treatment and construction. So the making of it was important to me. And also the concept, because it's a private collection, as are many of the collections in the US, and also therefore many of the museums are given the names of their founders and collectioners. And the idea is that the basic concept of it are these leaves, these long deflectors of light. And the audacity of the concept is that it's no longer northern light, but reflected southern light. And this is an important step. And it also belongs to the idea of a private collection, because in your home, you also have the changes of light, as everyone knows. So there may be a bit of light on you hang your first paintings on the walls of your house, and there is a change of light all the time. So to a private collection, it seems appropriate to have changing light, and you can see if it's cloudy or not, or that there's a cloud over the sun, or it's bright, clear sky, or that it's by the end of the day when the light color's a little bit more orange or warm. And this is accepted. So it's less neutral, but more specific. And this was something which struck my mind. I wrote an article about it at the time, saying that this to me was the perfect roof, and that I felt you couldn't do better, and if you build a museum, you would always have to do this. And now, 30 years later, I found out you can do better. In fact, I could do better, which was a great experience for me. I'll tell you. One of the things is that you let the light in, the glass roof is on top. So the heat comes in. And in Houston, energy is very cheap, so they are cooling like mad because but the energy costs are very low in Houston, in Texas. So that's why you can do it. But we can do better now, I tell you, and I'll explain to you. There's an interesting case of two buildings that were finished at the same time, the north wing of the Chicago Art Institute and the Brandhorst Museum in Munich, one by Renzo Piano Building Workshop and the other by Sauerbuch Hütten. Finished at the same time. And also with light designers of the same group, namely Arab. And one of the assistants of Peter Rice at the time for the Theater of the Full Moon was Andrew Sedgwick, and he designed both light concepts. And they are quite different, but they start the same. It's all about filtering and changing the light to a level which is acceptable to the inner galleries, which means you have to accept less than 1% of the light which is outside. So it's a lot of treating the light. It's a difficult tiger to tame, daylight. And the big difference starts with the approach to artificial light, which is an issue in itself. Often you see architects did a great thing in getting natural light in and mess up when they have to add artificial light, which of course you have to do for evenings and in our moderate climates like here in Latvia, but also in the Netherlands, also for November, December, January, the dark month of the year. So first of all, the Chicago Art Institute has a roof which filters the light and let northern light in. So still northern light. It's the flying carpet, architecturally very important. And then you filter it down so you have the glass roof under it, which is then already protected from direct sunlight. So a bit better in that sense than the menil. And also it opens up, the north wing, as the name says, opens up towards the north to have dramatic views over the Millennium Park, which is adjacent. So it's very elaborated, complex filter on the roof, which, by the way, also allows a little bit of reflections of southern light. So already there's a bit of color. And you have these glass roofs, which in this case, when I took the picture with my client, was blinded because of the way they wanted to focus on the art, but which can be open. And it's important in such cases to see a little bit of what is happening above your head, to understand where the daylight comes from. If you don't, you assume there will be some fluorescent light tubes somewhere that gives you the light. So it's essential that you see where it comes from, that it's a veil, not a voile, not something which is completely intransparent. On the other hand, it needs to be not too dominant, so to focus on the art. And of course, outside, it is an important architectural gesture, this roof. Well, the 3 floors, so the lower floors, in fact, only the upper one has this roof light, and the lower floors are lit, and this is sort of standard in American museums, standard by track-mounted halogen light, which is quite warm and feels nice, but you can argue if that is the best light for, especially for paintings, because it's quite difficult to get the right light, artificial light on paintings. And you see the way it works, the combination of these sculptures with the view on Chicago. That's quite, it's well detailed, and it's American standard. So a bit more specific, I would say, is the approach of the Brandhorst Museum in Munich, where in fact in one museum you find 3 different strategies for letting the light enter the building. And the basic idea is here to use as much daylight as you can and to suppress the idea of artificial light as much as you can. So first of all, it's a celebration of daylight, which is carbon-free, which is sustainable, and it's nice. And of course, they also need artificial light, but they try to not emphasize the presence of it. The first strategy is to let light in from the roof. And whereas the advantage of the Chicago Art Institute is that you don't have moving parts because of this fixed and elaborated filter of the floating roof, the flying carpet. Here in the upper part, they have quite a sophisticated system, as you can see, of louvers that change and dim the light before it enters through the ceiling. And this ceiling is completely translucent, so you don't see where the light comes from. Therefore, I always have the impression that there will be some fluorescent bulbs over my head, whereas it's pure natural daylight. A second strategy, and this is a very audacious one, is to let light in vertically and divert it horizontally and then again spread it over the walls. This is the lower gallery, then still enjoys daylight, which is by these lenses in the acrylic screen outside directed into a parabolic ceiling over the louvers. And the louvers help to spread that light evenly. And of course, the inner wall, which is in the right of the scheme, would naturally be more lit than the one that is facing the inside of the outer facade on the left. But by directing these louvers and by doing the calculations, which of course now we are able to do, Arab managed to get a sort of even spread of the natural light on the ground floor area. And then the third strategy is on the right of the scheme, which is to get light into the lower galleries, even into the basement, which you can see. So first of all, by a northern window with screens, you get the light into the staircase. And then the lower floors, which is the gallery on the right downstairs, gets light projection from the ground floor. And as you can see, there is in the area on the side, there is this roof of steel frames that let the light in horizontally and let it get down to have. So it's quite an audacious thing to have in one museum 3 different strategies of light treatment and to get daylight almost anywhere. So this was all in my mind when we started the Vorlinde Museum in Wassenaar. And my client was advised not to have daylight at all by a famous director of museums, art museums in the Netherlands. So I had to convince him that it would be a good idea. Normally, you don't have the money to do it, but in this case, money was not the issue. So I took him to the United States, and we visited many of the museums there, all of them with daylight, and eventually he became convinced of the concept. And it's important when you have a museum that opens up towards the outside. It's a beautiful site near the dunes, near the sea, and near The Hague. And that there is a balance between visible daylight and the light that comes from the roof. It helps to avoid this idea of counterlight, which can be a nuisance to perceiving the art and perceiving the space. The brief was to have 3 different parts in the museum. The private collection, which changes every half year, something like that. So this guy wants to show what he has. Then there's a part where they have loans and specially dedicated changing exhibitions once every 3 months or 4. And eventually a part where they have fixed works, which you cannot remove easily, especially this is a huge sculpture by Ron Muick on the right, but most conspicuous is as you can see on the right as well, the open-ended sculpture by Richard Serra. And as you can see in the plan of the museum, there are 3 parts. On the left is this private collection. The middle is also very well protected, and you can have the changing exhibitions. Recently, Anselm Kiefer, Nick Cave is there on stage right now. We had Picasso and Giacometti. And on the right, you see these fixed works, like a room by James Turrell, a swimming pool by Ehrlich, and the sculpture of Richard Serra. Ideas to have servicing walls, the idea came from Louis Kahn, mentioned in earlier keynote speeches. And also you see there's a tripartite division by which you can also, perpendicular to the main structure of the museum, you can see the outside. So when you get in, which is on the top, you also look out, as can be seen in the next picture. So you get this sense of different light, one directly to the outside, and the others where you get already a sense of the light of the galleries. And this is all done by the roof. So that was, in fact, the most important part of the concept and a key to the application of natural light. And whereas the question is always the same, how can we treat and direct the light and get it down from something between 50 and 100,000 lux to the required 600 or even less lux light level. It turns out to be a different design concept every time, which is fascinating. So that is why I will never say again that you cannot improve the concept. It's a sort of a constant design challenge. Here the idea was to have light tubes that would reflect the southern light. So I emphasized that it was the idea of having reflected southern light instead of northern light, also because it belonged to the idea of showing a private collection. And in the Netherlands, the steepest angle is about 60 degrees, 62. And as we all know from school, you have this square root of 3 times the diameter of the tube, and then the sun never enters. And then we cut it off so that we let the light in a bit more, so help the reflection. And this was tested in many ways, but we very primitively, we cut off sewage pipes and made our own cardboard stuff to have the first test. And later on, we tested a 1 to 10 model where we 3D printed the roof and did a lot of tests. You can see the arm of Andrew Sedgwick mounting the light meter. And we also established the glossiness of the roof panels and how it would influence the light level. So we came to the end, to the idea that something up to 800 lux was okay. So this defined the ratio between the hole and the diameter of the hole and the surface of the panels. Well, that seemed to be enough, and our client, as in the Chicago Art Institute, had asked to refrain from moving parts in the roof. So you see the first test panel here, But then he started to have contracts about the first exhibitions and to get loans in from Centre Pompidou and the Chicago Art Institute and MoMA, etc. And in those contracts, you often see that the maximum level is 200 lux. So you have to guarantee that there is no more than that. Well, there's a problem, because of course, it would be easy to make less holes, but then the light level in, say, October, November, or February would be too little to speak about natural daylighting. So you need, in fact, quite a good percentage of openings. But then, 200 lux, you'll never make it in summer. You need to close it. So what happens is that from an orthogonal order of the bulbs, we went to a diagonal, a 45 degrees order, enable us to shift over a second sheet of with an electric motor, which you see in the lower right part. So to be able, like diaphragms, to close the roof and to arrive at this 200 lux level. The tragic of the story is that the museum is now open for 7.5 years, and nobody came to control, and nobody ever closes this roof. It's always what it was meant to be in the early stages. Well, so here again you see how important it is to have some idea of how it works and to be able to look through the vellum and experience the daylight, though not too much, to remain and having the focus on the works of art. So in the galleries you see this vellum which spreads the light which comes down on the walls, and in the part which was right in the plan, which is for the sculptures and the fixed work, we have left out this vellum, so the light comes in more vertical and more raw, and you get this. You also experience the way the roof works. So there are, in fact, two parts of the roof. This is how it works, and here also the second part of the story, the artificial light comes in. So the roof protects from direct sunlight in the interior, both by spreading out, by cantilevering over the building, and also by these tubes that redirect southern light reflected into the main galleries. There's a glass roof, of course, to protect it from rain and the climate. And under the glass roof is that vellum which spreads the light on the walls. Now, how to integrate artificial light? And here we were helped by recent technology, EI, better and more sophisticated LED lighting, as you can see, which is held by Andrew Sedgwick in my office. 60 watt, which is quite a lot for LED. And it's so small that we managed to integrate it in the mullions of the glass roof outside. It's an uplight that lights the roof and redirects the light inside. So first of all, there's a very smooth balance between artificial and natural light. Sometimes you can completely do without, most of the time, by the way. But if you need it, you can add it a little bit, a bit more, and eventually the artificial light takes over. Second, so it's very smooth and very minimalistic, and you don't see the light. Well, if you know, you see the reflections of the uplights in the flange of the steel beams. But that is only if you know it, I think. The inside, it feels very natural. And also, because the heat level of the LED lighting is outside, we managed to get out of 3 air treatment machines to get 1 out. So it's also very, in the sense of sustainability and minimalizing the use of energy, is a very good gesture. So it felt very satisfying to have this combination of artificial light and daylight in this way, and that the light always comes from the same place, i.e. the roof, although from opposite parts of it. Of course, the artificial light reflects on the white, and the daylight comes through the holes. Yeah. So it's that sense of integration and minimalism which was quite satisfying. If you ever go to Amsterdam by plane, and try to sit on the right side, because if you fly over the museum, you see this roof. It's not Photoshop, montage or whatever. It's reality. This is taken from the Google Maps. So it's a very Cartesian roof, which continues also over the galleries where there is no daylight. So it's also an icon of the museum. The only deviation or the only intrusion is you see the little hole. This is the hole in the wall of the James Turrell space. But in fact, the roof became the main architectural gesture of the museum. And this is, well, almost by night you can see it's autumn, and the way the artificial light works for the museum when there's no daylight. I told you at the beginning that there was a story about indirect light, and we started with the moon. And as a small dessert, I want to give you the opposite. And this is my last slide. It's the hut of the English author George Bernard Shaw, where he was writing his books. And he liked sun. So this, as you can probably see underneath, it's built on a circle. And by his foot, he can turn the hut always towards the sun. So it's what they call in Italian girasole, the sunflower. This little hut is like a sunflower and always turning towards the sun, which I think is a very optimistic metaphor to end with. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And especially thank you for sharing those both aspects of architecture, poetic one and also the data-driven, which is probably as important in this case. I think that for most people, a relationship with light is similar, like with breathing, that we normally don't notice that in everyday life. Do you remember the moment when you start to more consciously think about light? Was it before studies of architecture or later during in your career?
Well, yeah. Well, there are a few important moments. One, but it's still an abstraction, and it's I would say professional abstraction. The moment when I understood the concept of the light treatment of the Menil Museum was, of course, very important to me. But I was already a professional, you could say, at that stage. So I think the early senses of light are all, you know, the way you had been growing up, and I sensed that this morning there was a lot about Nordic light, and which is connected to the idea of seasons also. So it would be interesting to have someone from the south where light can be your enemy, you know. So Campo Baeza or Rafael Moneo or so. Anyway, so that is, but we all have that sense of you wake up and you see Eastern light coming into your bedroom or something like that, you know, so that we all have those experiences with us. And Humbert Camerlot, the one who conceived the theater of the full moon, had a lot of imagination about redirecting light. So to get, for instance, the idea of having daylight in a basement, or what happens is that you have daylight in parking garages, which used to be awful spaces, but when all of a sudden you see daylight, and that sense that Martin was also showing of being underground but not feeling underground. These experiences add to your toolkit to treat architecture, and it's true that most architects work too much on the plan because it's functional, and too little on the section. So that is interesting, and of course I got impressed. I have stayed a couple of times overnight in the La Tourette monastery of Le Corbusier near Lyon. And you see how he treats the light, of course, in the church, in the chapel, but also the fact that at the end of a corridor, he has a window, but not direct light, because it's sort of a nuisance when you walk to light in a dark space. And I once had to reform a local government in the Netherlands, and I beautiful big stairs up, but I got sort of, I didn't like the way the light was coming towards me, and then I found out that it was a very good architect who did the building in the late 60s, that it was against his will that this stair was made, and he forgot to remove the window, so I could correct him. It was the governor who wanted to have this monumental staircase in the wrong place, in a sense. But sort of, well, there are many of those instances that you have to treat the light well, and on the other hand, if the building gets to be finished, so during construction, you always get presents.
You have also both worked in Europe, across Europe, and also in Beijing.
Yeah.
Was it working with light differently there?
Oh, it was a complete adventure. I have compared it with making a modern building in the times of Tugendhathaus and the villas of Le Corbusier, in the sense that you want to be technically sophisticated, but the society is not ready for it. So you get this, and in some cases the Chinese were very much ahead. So they had the most beautiful Italian cutting machines for the facade, etc. This was all very sophisticated. And in some ways they were very primitive, but very primitive can be also a good. So some of the things went extremely well just because they had stone masons and carpenters and real good craftsman. And let's not forget that industry can be a mixed blessing. It's, for instance, very hard to get your stuff in, like sanitary, without all the little marks on it, if it's Durafit or all the, and this is a sort of, to me, it's sort of sleek advertising. I don't want it. And if I go to the spa of Peter Zumthor in Vals, I don't see anywhere that the name of the maker of the taps on the taps. He would of course be mad about it. So. And this happened, so you could do things in China that you can't do in our society because you got all those, also the contractors, they want us to order the stuff and to choose a brand, basically, and not to design it yourself. So there's a new balance, and that balance was a bit reversed in Beijing.
Thank you very much. I have plenty of questions. I hope I will have a chance to ask them later in the discussion. Thank you very much.